Howdy, I'm Jason Lewis, and today on the 73 Autoedit Mustang, I'm putting a stop to this entire project with that, the Wilwood Superlite 6 front disc brake kit. Now this is an awesome kit, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to actually install this on your vintage muscle car. So let me break this down for you. Today's video is going to be the full install of the front disc brake kit. Now I'm going to do another video on the drum to disc brake conversion that I'm going to be doing on the rear end of this car. I just haven't finished assembling the rear axle, so stay tuned for that. And then I'll do a third video that'll actually show plumbing and pedal and master cylinder install. So I'll have the how-to on the entire brake system install in this series of videos, so keep checking back for more. So let's go over the basic parts of this kit. Okay, Pintos say hurry up and get this stuff on the car, so we'll go ahead and do that. But let me run down with you the basic parts of this kit. So you have your aluminum bearing hubs, you have your aluminum hat, and it's not a baseball hat, this is the actual hat that mounts your rotor to the hubs, which is pretty trick. We're going to be running the slotted and vented rotors, not the cross-drilled rotors. And to apply the clamping force to actually stop this rig are these beautiful 6-piston Superlight calipers. And then you have the miscellaneous hardware from bolts to bearings, seals, and all of the brackets that you'll need to get this stuff onto the car. Now here are a few of the little things that you're going to need. You need your original nuts and some new cotter pins and the capturing girdle from your original hub nut, some red Loctite, and then some grease, and then some safety wire. And then I like to safety wire the bolts that actually go from the rotor hat to the rotors. Now the kit came with 2-inch long wheel studs, and I'm opting for these 3-inch long ones because I have this idea that I want the car to be a little racier looking, and I want long studs sticking out and nuts that go in. So that was a choice that I made, so I ordered up some 3-inch long wheel studs, and so I'll put those in on the hubs in a little bit. So that's about it. Everything that you need to put this on your car and get driving comes with this kit. The only thing you might have to get is a steel braided brake line that would adapt from your Wilwood caliper to your stock line. But I'll be doing all of the plumbing fresh in this car, and I'll be showing you videos on that. All right, so first up is to take your mounting block and actually mount it in place. Dry, and what you're checking for right now is to see if it fits flush, if there's any casting irregularities on your spindle, and we'll get this thing installed. Now you just want to tighten these down just tight. You're not torquing these yet. This is mostly for alignment. Next up is to put the caliper mounting bracket on in place right here. Now what you're doing now is putting everything in dry, no Loctite, no anything, just so you can get the spacing and the alignment right of the rotor to the caliper. So they recommend to start with 2 of these shims, these 030 shims, in the front and rear of this thing. So we'll go ahead and get this ready to rock with 2 030 shims. And you always want to make sure that you have equal amount of shims on both bolts at every adjustment. So then we'll thread this on, tighten it down. We just want that tight, not torqued yet. All right, now that that's on and solid, everything looks perfect here, let's go build the hub. All right, so let's get this hub assembled and get it ready for installation. Now you'll notice first off that there's 2 sets of wheel lug patterns on here. You'll see the outer ones are for GM applications at 5 lugs on 4 3/4 inches across. And then the Ford application, which is going to be used here because this isn't a Mustang, obviously. So that'll be the inside holes on 5 lugs, 4.5 across. So let's get these in. So you want to make sure you do that correctly now, so that way you don't get this whole thing installed on the car and you go, hey, sweet, I ordered my rims, my wheels and tires don't fit anymore. So even though I'm sporting this impressive gun show right here, I actually couldn't hold this thing and torque the lug bolts to 77 foot-pounds, so I had to take it over to my bench vise, get it stabilized, got everything torqued to 77 foot-pounds. Let's move on and pack the wheel bearings. Now, it's time to get frisky with your brake parts. Don't worry, Mr. Bearing, you're just gonna feel a little bit of pressure for a few minutes. Yeah, that's right. Now, please, don't be concerned. I took these bearings and this hub out to dinner a few times this week. So it's not, you know, I'm not getting all up in its business on the first date. But on the serious note, you do want to make sure that you actually really pack these things good. It's very important that you start off with grease packed in all of its little bits and pieces, all down in the area, and you just want to just push it into each of these things. Just pack it in with your fingers, work it around really good. Get to know your bearings. It's good to know your bearings. You're gonna want to just install that inside the back of your bearing hub. Again, don't be ashamed. Get to know your bearings. Get to feel them. All right, now let's put the rear grease seal on. I like to put a little grease on the seal itself, which is this little rubber thing here in the middle, and then a little grease around the outside, which makes it a little easier to install. And you get that lined up there. Now you want that to just press in nice and even around there. So here's a little trick I use, just improvise some tools I have around the shop. I just use this engine puller, engine hoist puller. You get it on there nice and level. Then you just give it a little tap. And there you go. You have the rear grease seal in. Looks nice and flush. Looks nice and happy. I clean any extra grease off the outside because that's just grease that's going to want to fling as you get moving. But there you go. Rear bearing in and greased. Flip it over. Let's do the front. All right, Mr. Front Bearing, are you ready? So let's get this thing packed up. Same drill as the back bearing. Just get all up in its business. Pack the grease into all the little nooks and crannies. You want your bearings to be happy. And a happy greased bearing means a happy muscle car. Okay, now that your hub is lovingly assembled and lubed, you get to install it. So you carefully put it on the spindle. Bearing rides all the way to the back. Seal doesn't rub, sits to the back of this thing. Looks great. Now, this is where we use the original nut, but with the washer, the capture washer that Wilwood supplied. Put that on. Now you want to tighten this nut right here just tight enough to get it snug. Now you'll see there's a significant amount of drag here on this, but what you're doing is you get it to where the bearings are seated and sealed and everything is in position. Now the tricky part is, and it's not really actually that tricky, you back it off a quarter turn, 1/16 to a quarter turn they recommend. It's a little too snug for me. There we go. That feels great. And then, look at that. Then you replace the cotter key. Feels good. And we're locked in place. Then you put your little cap, your shiny new Wilwood cap on there. And that is it for the hub. Okay, so let's grab our rotor and hat. Now these are specific to the side of the vehicle and the rotation. First off, it's a good idea after you've been handling the bearings and using all that grease to clean your hands off so you don't have really greasy hands when you're handling this stuff. You're gonna clean it with brake cleaner anyway, but I just like to, if you notice, I like to keep my stuff organized and keep track of everything as I go. So we'll take the hat, it bolts to the outside flange of this rotor. There's an arrow on the rotor, and so now you know that this is the outside. That arrow goes this way. We're on the passenger side of the vehicle, so that's the way that'll go. So let's get our rotor there. So now I'll bring you on in. I'll show you the install of each of those bolts, and then we'll get these safety wired. I like the Loctite and safety wire, just because it's fun and you get to use this cool tool, and it gives you that peace of mind that it's just rock solid, nothing's going anywhere. There's a lot of vibration that gets induced through this during the braking process. So just a little dab of Loctite on there. We'll get all of these bolts run in. Okay, so these bolts are all just snugged up. Nothing's tight. They're just, everything's in position. Double check everything looks good. Everything's lined up, looks symmetrical. Bolts are through. Now we're gonna torque these to 155 inch-pounds. Remember, inch-pounds, and we'll do it in a cross pattern. So you just go across the rotor. Keep track of where you started. And then you just work your way around.
And now that the bolts are torqued, it's time to grab the safety wire and get started. The basic premise here is simple: to attach two bolts together mechanically with the wire to keep them from loosening up. First, thread the wire around the tightening side of one bolt. Grab it with the special pliers and give it a few pulls to get a nice twist in the wire. Then thread that end through the second bolt. Give a few more twists, cut the excess off, and tuck the tail in so nobody gets poked, namely me.
Okay, and then you just slide the rotor and hat on, making sure that you have these holes where their countersink screw will actually keep this in place. And then these get torqued to 85 inch-pounds. Okay, that's not a lot. Okay, there you go. Now, we're gonna put the caliper on and check for clearance and alignment. As you can see, if you can't see, there's a small arrow right here that lets you know the direction that this wheel should be turning, or this rotor should be turning inside here. So this is the passenger side because it's going that way. Now, they want you to put a little light oil on the caliper mounting bolts, which I did, or studs, and then they want you to start with this shim right here. Now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna do an install of this and adding to the awesomeness. I mean, geez Louise, it's so cool to just see that go on. Holy mackerel. And then we'll kind of bolt it into place, tighten it down. Okay. Now, we're gonna look and check our alignment. And now this will change the shims up or down or right or left. Now it looks to me like we're pretty much dead center inside there. So now let's take the pad bar out. So the pads should just drop in very easily. And they do. Now it looks to me like the pads are sitting just a bit outside the rotor here. So I'm gonna go ahead, pull it back apart, and I'm gonna take the actual shim that sits underneath the caliper out and get the caliper to sit lower. Okay, this small washer out. This caliper will now set ever so slightly lower. In there, pads in, pads in, and sure enough, we got it just ever so slightly lower in there. That's what it looks like. Yeah, the balance bar's in there. So I'm happier with the way that that fits in there now. So now we know we have our spacing correct and as close as we want it, everything's centered, so we can go ahead and pull these bolts back out and add Loctite and torque these to the correct specs. So we do our final install and double check and position on the caliper. And then those gets torqued to 35 foot-pounds. Okay. Okay. There you have it. Now let's put the pads in. You should go right in because we've already done this. And sure enough, voila. All right, so everything looks good there. So now let's put the pad retaining tube back in. Put that bolt that captures that there. There's a lock nut for the back side of that. And the point of this one is just to be tight so it doesn't rattle and come off. Okay, so there it is, the Wilwood Superlite 6 front brake kit for the early muscle cars. Man, this thing is awesome. You saw how easy that was to do. Just take your time and make sure you get everything right. Now, the next video, I'll do the drum to disc conversions for the rear, and then the video after that, I'll do the plumbing and the bleeding and how to set up your master cylinder and a proportioning valve for all this to just complete the system. So until next time, enjoy your drive.